welcome back to Mystical Sisterhood. This is your host, Maureen Spielman. And today I'm here with Leslie and Juan, who I had introduced in the intro today. I can't thank the two of you enough for being here with me. I met Leslie on my journey with Dr. Shefali's conscious parenting. And that was just a beautiful road we traveled together. And then Juan came into my life through Susie Lula's soul care certification. So we mostly know each other from video screen, Juan, I know, and you too, Leslie. But you live in Mexico. I know you travel the world and share for children. And so today we're here to talk about relationships. And I think that relationships are something that definitely intrigue me. They make the world go round, yet we don't have a lot of training in how to do them. And so I know the two of you to be so deeply committed to the work and practitioners of desiring to be in a conscious relationship and so willing to take a look at yourselves. And I know that because it's the training I've been in with you, and it's what's asked of us as we are in relationship with another. So today I really want to look at, when we're in relationship with you too, it's with anybody, but today it's with your primary partner we're talking about. What does it look like? We all come to each other with different backgrounds, our different life experiences, possibly our own traumas, our woundings, the things that are our shadows from the past. And so, one of my questions today will be around, how do we bring these together in loving relationship? Because I think so many times we come into that loving relationship and then across time, our backgrounds they might begin to collide a little bit. So, that it's looking at like, okay, when we hit these places, how do we can we move into a more intentional, mindful space of consciousness where we're considering how we show up in relation to the other. And so that's just, I know, Leslie, you and I had talked about a few pre-planned questions, but just to introduce the audience to you, I'll start with you, Leslie, and, how you find yourself sitting here with me today talking about relationships.
Well, first of all, thank you for having us here. I love sitting here with you and just having this candid conversation, and especially sharing here with my significant other, my husband and partner. And like you said, we share 4 children and a lot of history, 22 years.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I am so grateful to you. And how do I find myself here? I think it's been a combination of what the universe has brought onto my life in this incarnation, and this soul feeling of wanting to really transcend and evolve certain things. I feel it in the core of me, like this sense of wanting to be more in my heart space and understand more from my heart. And that, I think, eventually led me through a lot of hardships to conscious parenting, where we met. And when I say hardships, I mean because through the typical parenting journey, things that happen and that trigger us, and that I thought this cannot be the way. And which eventually led me to Dr. Shefali, and that led me to Susie Lula, who we both share as a mentor as well. And that started to really change how my relationship was with my husband, not only my children, but when I started to peel all of these layers, there was a disconnect in where we were. And I think at one point we had to make a choice whether we wanted to have this relationship to be a conscious relationship, or if we were going to let each other go in different ways. And that was a really hard time. But I think that that's what led then us really working towards okay, we want this to be a more of a conscious growth and evolution for us as partners, right?
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Good to see you again. Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it was a straightforward, you know, we share four children. I don't think we were gonna let each other go, like not see each other because we share four children, but we were definitely in a position to have to redefine a relationship. I think as Leslie peeled away the layers, it forced her to really take a hard look at kind of where she was and where she wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
And in that process, to question everything. And in questioning everything, to kind of question our relationship, which made me understand that I needed to be a more together, more all around, well-rounded, right? I was very unidimensional. I was very focused on work. Leslie was very focused on children in the house. And when it became evident that we had just kind of we woke up one day and a lot of stuff had happened and we needed to define our relationship again. I needed to be more well-rounded. So that took me to do a lot of personal work and a lot of kind of soul searching to understand, you know, how I could be a good father, right?
Yeah.
Because in this moment that we're describing, you know, our relationship had reached a turning point. We were either gonna be consciously together or consciously apart. There was no other way of going at it. And the consciousness part of it, I think, becomes the self-aware, vulnerable, you know, conversational acknowledgement that we each have our own work to do, and that we each bring all this, you know, the stuff that we assembled or accumulated over the course of a lifetime, right? Just scars and wounds and things of that nature that we got as kids, and then as young adults, and then as, you know, and even in our own, you know, in our marriage, as young, you know, newlyweds, and then we bring that to the table. And so now with that and looking at that, acknowledging that and making space for that, you know, how do we best, you know, share these children and share this life? And so through that took me to, you know, work that I did on my own, then work I did with therapists and coaches. And then through Leslie invited me to be a part of Susie's collective, which was awesome. I met you know, 4 other guys that were doing it as well, which was phenomenal. And then having that relationship with those guys was fantastic because we could speak the same language. And then onwards to, you know, to continue our work, I guess, from there, to continue our work daily and to continue our practice, and then to be invited here with you.
I love it. Well, thanks for sharing both of your, you know, sides of that question. And what I see and hear is that perhaps Leslie and Juan, you may have been on the path somewhat even before, but that Leslie, you stepped into these teachings that really just opened up your world to a lot of new questions. And I'm knowing self-reflection as well. But then there was an invitation for Juan to partner in on that. And like I'm sensing on Juan's side there, I don't know if for a time there wasn't a willingness, Juan, to enter into it.
You know, I think Leslie and I have both been very curious, just about all things. And I think that's one of the things that has drawn us together.
One of the reasons we travel a lot, because you mentioned, you know, and
in that curiosity, I think I've always been a bit of a seeker of, you know, different philosophies, different ways of looking at life. But that also made me a bit of a chameleon. And so in this process where she kind of began, I guess, peeling back the layers of what she had become, right, to try to find the human that she had been originally. It also, you know, obviously changes or makes you look at yourself in that way. And so, I mean, yeah, initially she was taking all these consciousness classes and mindfulness and meditation. And we kind of found meditation at a similar time, but I was more intermittent about it. And I would really, I am a workaholic. I'm going to always be addicted to my work, or addicted to doing stuff. And she, you know, it was always easy for me to justify not continuing with it, right? It was always a negotiable part of my existence, where work was the non-negotiable. And
I would say you're a recovering workaholic, but
well, I'm always, I honestly feel like it's just a daily, it's a daily decision,
yeah.
just like a lot of things. But so I think, yeah, I was reluctant. And it was always because my work, right? I'm so busy. I've got all this stuff I have to do. I've got the pressure of 5 other humans, survival, and, so on and so forth. And a lot of that story that you tell yourself. So yeah, I was a reluctant participant in it. And now she was really, we kind of made a deal at one point in our marriage where, we had more kids than we could manage without one of us being full time. And we really had a conversation where we said, listen, which of the 2 of us is the best equipped for this caregiving? And at that time, Leslie's career was on fire. So she gave up a successful career because we both recognized, even though she's tremendous at everything she does, but she was tremendous at that she was a better caregiver for these young kids than I was. So we made a deal. You focus on the home and I'll focus on work. And it was funny because we kind of both were, I think, stoically resentful.
well, we took it very seriously.
Right.
So I was like full on children mom mode, and he was full on I'm provider mode. And in this in this space, it became very lonely because then we weren't, even though the idea was to work as a team, we really were working on like alone, right?
And it's little pieces of the equation start, chinking away at that. But in that process, yeah, I mean, I really was a reluctant participant. I mean, she would, here, you should read Shafali's book. I'm like, oh, sure. I know I should. I'll get to that. And I'll be like, just give me the cliff notes. Like, tell me what tell me what you're doing. I'll try to support you as best I can. And so, yeah, I mean, I made room for her to do what she wanted, what she needed to do. But I wasn't enthusiastic and I wasn't collaborative. In fact, for a time, we would tell our 2 oldest boys, if I remember this, we would say, hey, listen, daddy has a way of doing things. Mom has a way of doing things. It's a little different.
It's different.
So you're just going to have to, grandma has a way of different things. We kind of had this way of explaining, and it is true. Everybody has a way of doing things. But one day, I saw the connection that she had with our kids. And I was like, wait a minute. Like, I want that, right? And it wasn't about the authoritative parent that I was kind of modeling myself after, because that's what I had seen. And I had both models in my home, right? I had my mom, who was almost like my sister, so not a mother relationship, but a lot of very connected as a child. And my grandparents, which were really the parents in the family, in the household, very authoritative. And I began being my grandparents as a parent.
Yeah.
And I kept going back to, like, oddly enough, my mom is now my grandparents in terms of her style of doing things. But when I was a child, it was that way. So I had a great connection, and I grew up with a connected parent that I would do things because of my connection. Also because of, other things that I took on as a child. But I wanted that. I wanted our kids to be collaborative and want to do things, not be submitted to doing things. And so I got more involved. And when we got to a breaking point, I thought, I'm going to be a single dad, and I don't want to be the authoritative, disenfranchised, unconnected parent. I want to be a connected parent. So I got into parenting for real. And I think that was, it wasn't a condition. It wasn't like, oh, if I do this, maybe, I kind of pretty much thought it was a foregone conclusion. We were not going to continue together. And so I was doing it just to be a better human.
Yeah, at this point, it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't a condition, because I had learned that the more I pushed for him to come into this world with me, the more I took from myself. Right. And so the more judgment I had towards him was actually the judgment of me not going deeper. And I was using my energy to try and control him to do something, and not for me to keep going into my path.
And I think it's like many things. I mean, I think until you reach that point, whether it's in your personal journey, I don't know, you lose something, you lose someone. I'm speaking as a guy, right? As a man. I think until you come to it, well, I think everyone has to come to it under their own terms, but I think men in general, because I mean, in the work that we've done and now being part of a collective and all of different groups, I hear more, this is a path women find and follow. and kind of drag us along, right? And I don't think you can drag anybody along with it. Everybody has to come to it under their own terms. Like we've got some friends that are also part of the Shefali, Susie kind of environment ecosystem. And the same thing. I mean, I kind of found my way to this through maybe, my master's brought in meditation, oddly enough. And then I did yoga through the pandemic, and we found a lot of parallels in the stuff that I was reading around yoga and the stuff Leslie was reading and learning around Shefali, that we could begin to actually have some resonance and have some point of comparison. So we each kind of found our own path. And the same is the case, I think, of some of our friends that are in a similar kind of dynamic. A guy, maybe, new business, turning a different page, maybe, huge creator of a business, death of a human in their life, something kind of shakes you up and really wakes you up, it really kind of makes you conscious, for the lack of a better term, of what you're doing, what you've been doing or not doing, and what you want to do, more importantly. And I think that's where it starts, right? You kind of go, oh, wow, now I understand. And I kind of want to get to the bottom of not who I've become through inertia, right? In this case, a bit of our kind of pact on I'll work and you do the family, and then all the other things that shape your inertia, right? As a professional guy, expectations of your parents, family, business, whatever those things may be, right? And all of a sudden, well, what really are you? What do you want to be? And you kind of need to do that work, go inside. And it's that going inside in parallel that begin, at least in our case, that began to give us another point of confluence, right? The kids had become logistics and a beautiful shared experience, and an amazing opportunity for growth. But it wasn't until I took that and turned it inwards that I really began to understand the journey you were on, that we had a lot of stuff to kind of go back and forth on. So yeah, I think that's the net effect of how, I guess, a conscious relationship comes.
Oh, I love it. There's so much good sharing there. What came to mind for me is it was a decision that you consciously made to go forward at a point that could have gone another way, and that you both took responsibility for the way that you were showing up. And I think that's profound. And I think it's what you're saying. You can't lead someone else to the work. You can't make them do it. And Leslie, I can speak to, how you talked about the projections you were making on Juan. And I've done the same myself. And it's the process of really being able to see ourselves in that process. And we know that's not solving any problem. That's coming from almost like, I'm going to fix him. I'm going to change him. And if we're with a partner and we have this desire to change them, it's just not a fruitful, productive process.
Codependent cycle, still trying to be more conscious, but still trying to see
Yes.
or, and when they don't change, then you become a victim. Oh, why aren't you changing? And so stepping out of that and coming back in. And that's what a conscious relationship is. It is knowing that the most important element of the relationship is first and foremost you. And this happens even with our children. We know that in conscious parenting, but with our partners, a conscious relationship is having a committed sense of growth, of service to yourself, then your partner, and then obviously to the collective growth around you. But it's this, you can't have the service to the world, for example, and not care for you, right?
Mhm.
Or to your partner and not care for you. So it starts here. And then once I know myself, I can connect to myself. I know my triggers. Then I can really start to see my partner for who they are, not wanting to change them. And
communicate
Mhm.
those realizations, so that the other human in the dynamic can also respond and show up for you, and put, obviously in parallel, doing your own work to show up for yourself first and advocate for yourself. Listen, I feel this, I need this, I think this, and then listen, and then, be in a position to hold space and collaborate on it.
Right.
Because if you, just arrive at all those realizations and don't communicate them, it's very lonely, but also be very difficult, because the other human in the dynamic can't dance with you. So, yeah.
And it's so hard for all of those listening who are in a relationship and are already on their journey, but their partner is not, whether you're a man or a woman. It is a very lonely place to be initially, and not having your companion, your life companion who you've chosen, or maybe the father or mother of your children, to not be on this path. So my advice, I guess, would just be continue to come back to yourself, trust in the process for yourself, because you're not doing this for the other, you're doing this for you, and the other might or might not meet you, but having a relationship with yourself first is going to be, I guess the dessert.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's that effect. Right.
Yeah, no, it made me think of how we hear and we know that we often turn to the other. That's the way we were kind of conditioned. The other can meet our needs. And what I hear you saying is that no, you go to yourself first to understand what your needs are. And to, Leslie, I know that you do a lot of work around reparenting. And can you speak to what you mean by that, or why that would be beneficial in relation to a relationship?
Yeah, for sure. Well, for me, conscious parenting is synonymous to reparenting, really.
Mhm.
I think we know that at one point, Shefali mentioned, I don't know if you remember, but she used the word parenting as like a hook to get parents in, because she knew she had to get to the parent, but they wouldn't come in if it wasn't for the word parenting.
You do anything for your kids.
Yeah,
not
exactly.
So much for
And
your-
so reparenting is this concept, which I think is getting to be more and more well known. But in short, what it means is now as an adult, you give yourself all of those things that your parents could not give you, not because they didn't love you or they didn't care, but they just couldn't. They were living with their projections, their perceptions, their traumas, their wounds. And there are things that were not needs that were not met when you were a child, that you carry and you bring on to your parenting, your relationships, your friendships, your work.
I'll give a quick example. And this was right around the time that on this inflection point, but my son has a remarkable ability, to be a mirror. And so one day he did something, and I grabbed him and I put him down really hard on a couch. But the couch, I didn't know, the couch had a piece of wood that was kind of like odd geometry. So when I set him down, he hit his bum. And he had been screaming, and I had just not been able to take it. I just couldn't manage the screaming. And so I went back and I actually did a bunch of work with my coach, and I did some inner child meditation, realized that I had never been allowed to scream as a child. My mom lived with my grandparents, and my grandparents, well, they were children of the 20s.
Yeah.
And they were not allowed to scream. And so you were not allowed to scream, you couldn't yell, you couldn't be destructive. And so I had to go back and do a bunch of, visualizations and meditation and, dynamics included in talk therapy to figure that out and then to allow for it. And later I can now be fine with screaming. I mean, I'll tell you that I enjoy it, but I also recognize that it's part of them finding their voice, and that it's important for them to show their emotions, and that I should probably do more of that than I do. And so like that's a way of, I reparented myself through facilitation, right? To go of some baggage that was keeping me from enjoying my children, right? Which so that's an example.
Maybe his need was he needed to be heard and he couldn't be heard. And so how can we go to that need when we reparent and really hear ourselves and respect those needs, witness them, see them for what they are, and then give ourselves the love that we actually needed. So that, I love the example. And that's basically how I use reparenting for myself and with my clients.
And I mean, the reason why having a conscious relationship is impactful in my life, right, as a guy, is because I can have this conversation with Leslie and say, hey, listen, like I'm having a really hard time with yelling, right, or with something else. And I just find that it really just puts me in a state of mind that is not like very cognizant, right, that I just kind of shut off. Okay, well, I'm gonna go work on that. So cut me some slack and then I'll go work on it. Maybe over the course of a week or 2 or 3 or 4, or whatever, however long it takes me to talk to my coach and journal and do the things that I need to do to work through it. Then maybe I'll come to you and say, hey, I think I've sorted this out, right? I need to make some space for this piece of it. And please, when you see me do that, like I need you to do this for me, right? I realize that my love language is touch, so just touch me gently.
Mm-hmm.
Your hand on my shoulder, say, hey, like
Yep.
that will ground me. I'll come back, right? And I'll remember to respond versus react. Now, that is not always possible. Like, you know, we have 2 kids, 2 boys. All of a sudden, one of them is beating the other one up, and like I'm just going to grab one of them and rip them off his brother just so that they don't hurt each other, right? But as soon as I calm down, or as soon as I remove that, then Leslie knows, hey, okay, that's okay. Like if she still sees me that I'm yelling or very like in fight or flight, she kind of will know how to help, offer assistance if she thinks it's necessary, or I will be in a better position to assist myself because I'll recognize it and then, regulate. So it's a way of making space for each other to either support each other if you feel it's appropriate, or just leave space for the other person to kind of do their own work, right? And have their own growth so that they can be their own best tool. So that's, I think, the biggest piece for me in this dynamic that has been phenomenal.
Yeah. It sounds like a big piece of it too is the spaciousness, and to afford one another the spaciousness and grace to work our own process, because it's not, we know from any of this consciousness work, it's not a quick fix. That's not why we're here. It's part of our soul's curriculum, what we have to work out. And I was somewhere recently and I was so comforted because the woman had said, sometimes what you have to work through can take years. And I was like, and I think she even said decades. I just, thought, thank you. That makes me feel better. But just to know that it's around the intention to, work together. And one thing that's kind of funny, I'm thinking of today too, funny or not, is just when we come into partnership and when we come, whether it's with each other or parenting, we are bringing so many people with us, generations before us. And our work here is really, I like both of you saying that it's our own personal work, because in this lifetime, it's to know ourselves so deeply as our wholest, most authentic self. And so, yes, those voices are coming through, and that was our default, our programming. But what if we were able to cultivate who we truly were meant to be?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Today we were talking, we knew we had the podcast with you, and we were just talking about what our relationship looks like now that we are more in awareness of ourselves. And, there was 5 things that we discussed that we think are important to just have in mind when we're looking to have a conscious relationship. And the first one is obviously what we mentioned initially. What is a conscious relationship? You're always prioritizing your growth as well. And that way you can prioritize the growth of the couple and then the collective growth, right?
That's just like, airplane crash survival 101. Put on your own oxygen mask before the person next to you,
and the thing is, we're indoctrinized to think that that's selfish, and we have to drop that belief. It's a limiting belief. And because the more that we can come back to our heart and learn more about ourselves, the more open, and we don't do it to be more open. It just happens naturally. Right. So we talked about that being the first. And then the other, which he's been giving some examples, is taking responsibility for our own stuff, like the triggers that we come with. Like you said, we all come with voices and stories and all sorts of things that are passed down generation through generation. And so taking responsibility for that, because there are certain things that maybe the screaming triggered Juan, but it didn't really trigger me as much. Right. And that's just an example. And why? Because the way that he grew up and what he's bringing, his baggage. Right.
And that was evident because I would look around at people that didn't care that people were screaming, and I was like, why does it not bother them and it bothers me?
It was like the pitch, the noise was
yeah.
So taking responsibility for our triggers and our own stuff. And then also, number 3 is allowing all feelings to be valid. So one of the things that happens in relationships and traditional relationships is that we have this fantasy, you know, the Cinderella happily ever after, that when you're in a relationship, and I'm telling you, you know, we talked about us being together we've been together for 22 years, is this idea that you're going to be happy every single day. And if you're not happy, then you're failing, you know, and your marriage is not successful and you're not doing it right. And all of these limiting beliefs. And it's really going back to allowing, when you start learning about yourself, allowing and knowing that all feelings are valid for the person in front of you and for you. It doesn't mean that the person is going to be disrespectful or hurtful, but if the person is mad or sad or in grief or whatever emotion they're going through, to make space for that, and then allow your emotions to also be witnessed, and ask for help if you need to.
And that I'll add, I think one is what I grew up with, this conventional wisdom that you shouldn't go to bed angry.
Yeah.
Right. And that was like something passed down as a little pearl of wisdom from my mom and her grandmother. And I wholeheartedly disagree with that. But it starts with feeling and recognizing that you're feeling angry, which is a challenge for a lot of guys. Me specifically, we're just not taught that. So I think going back to the reparenting concept and dealing with your own stuff concept, really understanding, and as a man, being able to name your feelings and acknowledge them so that you can make space for them and communicate them. And then you have to allow them, to Leslie's point. You may have to go to bed angry. You may feel like, gosh, I want to make it better. And I don't know if I'm traveling tomorrow, so I don't want to leave angry. It's okay. You got to let the anger be angry.
So we'll give you a small example about, because of course, having a conscious relationship does not mean you're not going to argue. So I want to put that out there. So if you're thinking that this is a perfect relationship, it is not. It's not linear, just like life is not linear. But that's the point, that you accept the ups and downs in a different way. So about 3 weeks ago, I think we had a big argument. I don't even remember.
I was going to tell you, I don't remember
what the argument was about, but it was really, really big. And, you know, talking about not going to bed angry. So we were like in our bedroom, and, I think I remember now. I'm doing a lot of schoolwork, and I'm always learning and wanting to expand in different ways. And it just feeds my soul. I love it. But we have 4 kids and we both work, and life gets crazy during the day. So sometimes at night, you know, I bring my studies into the bedroom, and Juan has communicated with me that, you know, he'd like for that to be us time more than, because he used to bring work in. And for me, I don't see it really as work, because I see it as like grow, you know, it's like feeds my soul, like I said. But in listening to him, when there is something that I do urgently have to do, and I just did not have a moment because there was tons of tantrums and things happening that were crazy. You know, I'll talk to him and say, hey, I really need to finish this. This is the only time. This is when my house is quiet, because when the work that I do, I'm in flow. And when you're interrupted, it's really hard to be in flow. And that day, Juan was not okay with that. And he said, no, like, this is our time. And anyway, we went back and forth, but then other things came up. We were both tired. It's like 11:30 at night, you know? So he started saying some things, and then I started seeing them from my perspective, which was totally different from what he meant. And we just kind of like, bump. And then our son ended up coming in, our 11-year-old. And he came in and he said, do you want some child wisdom? And he's like, you guys either need to take a break or go on an adventure together, but I need you to stop fighting, you know? And we were like,
can't sleep.
Wow.
Yeah, can't sleep. So we're like, oh my goodness.
Well,
so
it reinforced the concept of Sabios, which is your company, right? The wisdom of children.
Sabios means wise ones. And, you know, our children are our wise ones.
But they shouldn't have to come in and parent
right.
you.
No,
that was not okay.
Which we've now
Talk to him
talking
about each other.
But the point to this is that when we realized, oh my goodness.
I traveled the next
Yeah,
day and we stayed
and-
angry for a few days and
So-
we allowed it.
Yeah, so he left the next day and I said, please don't write me a wall of texts on chat about you being upset because it's not going to be productive on chat. When you read something on chat, you read what you think you want to read and not really
So
what
true.
the person is meaning, right? So it gave us 4 days to just kind of, not be in fight or flight and come in. I had therapy during that time. We both journaled. We were ready when we saw each other. We went on a date to the beach. There was no interruptions. We weren't at a restaurant or anything. And we were able to then listen and communicate. So, and allow the feeling. So, anyway, that was a long rant about, just allowing and making space for all feelings
Yeah.
to be valid.
Well, I love that because before we met, I was thinking about how do you repair when there's a rupture? How do you repair? And that the allowance seems to be a big, and you spoke your mind, what you needed to ask for, Leslie, and say
Right.
like, this is not going to work for me right now. So Juan, you mentioned communication earlier, that communicate, because I think that communication is such a huge piece and just
But there's also
constantly.
how you communicate. I'm sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
but there's Leslie, we were going back and forth and we were talking about how to communicate.
Yeah.
And there's always, you have to communicate from allowing for what would love say?
Mhm.
What would love say in this situation? And how would love speak? Because you can't come at it from just from a factual standpoint.
Yeah.
And you obviously have to have compassion for each other. So I think it's an important element to give yourself that space and allow enough of that for processing to be able to engage from a place where you can actually answer the question. How would love act in this? What would love say in this situation? Right.
It's beautiful. It makes me think when you were at your crossroads and you made your really intentions to come together in the way you have, did you sit down and create any sort of agreement, or was that all in conversation, or how did that look for you? If like moving forward, because Juan, that was such a beautiful example of leading with compassion, leading with from that heart-centered space.
Yeah. We did.
Yeah, we did. But it came from a different place. It was like Juan said, what would love say? And it came from a place. I did an exercise. I work very closely with Heno, who you know, and we help each other when we're going through things. And we did an exercise where kind of went above the situation, not mountaintop per se, but just above the situation, and was able to go into his energy and see how he was feeling. And then go into my energy and see how I was feeling. And it really gave perspective of not judging the other, but just witnessing the feelings. And then witnessing my feelings so that then I could go and reparent those and then communicate with him, hey, these things don't sit well with me. But then it's not coming from a place of blame
or reactivity.
Because when we're in blame, and this is for all partnerships to know, when we're in blame, we're an inner child. There's so it was coming from a place of deep, of a heart wisdom. And that reminds me, there's a quote that I love by Rumi that I just pulled up that says, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. Right? And so we build these barriers where we're in relationship.
Stories.
We build these stories, and then we look for love, but we forget to come back. And so when we were able to both come back, then we could, we then came to an agreement of certain things that we want to do differently and how we can do that.
Yeah. But I think you also meant, when you asked about the crossroads, kind of a bigger picture in our relationship, right? Not just in this kind of particular argument. Yeah.
Right.
And we did also do that. We came together and we agreed to have kind of intentional touch points to check in with each other on how we were feeling in the relationship. We try to do it often, just at the end of the day. Did you feel seen? Did you feel heard?
We asked each other those questions.
Did I speak
every day.
your love language today? Little things like that help us just tweak day to day. But also, we have had a few meetings really since then, where we sit down and just check in, how are you feeling? You know, and the idea is not to get so far that coming together requires a big shift, right? But just to try to keep the parallel lines, not intersecting. We're never going to meet, right? We're always going to be kind of journeying together. But to try to keep that distance, you know, within something that feels like we're not falling asleep at the wheel, right? It's just kind of how I feel it happened. We were just kind of like, we were on the super long drive and like, you just kind of fell asleep at the wheel. And you needed to like wake up and figure out that the road had gone a different direction.
Well, and this leads into the number 4 of the 5 things that we were talking about in terms of a conscious relationship is practicing love with presence, right? And when we decided, okay, we're going to stay in this relationship, it is in the now that we stay for as much as we can. And so that's when we look into, you know, if there are stories coming in or expectations or different things, we know that we're in the past or we're in the future, right? So then coming back and centering ourselves in the now and practicing love it sounds funny because you're like, well, love just is, and it is, but we have to practice it in a relationship because things happen and we get caught up in the day or in parenthood or in work. And if you are not intentional about practicing love and, you know, witnessing the other, it can get, like he said, instead of being parallel lines, we are perpendicular and we start going in different directions.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Did you have another one, Leslie?
Oh, just the number 5, you know, we talked, number 1 was always prioritize our own growth and then the growth of the partnership and the collective growth. Number 2 was taking responsibility for our own stuff and triggers. Number 3 was feel everything we feel is valid. And it's not a fantasy, you know, or rather thinking everything is going to be always happily ever after is a fantasy. And number 4, practice love with presence. And the 5th is to play and bring in play. So one of the things that we try to do is when we do have dates, and we have to be very intentional about making time because of our busy lives and so many children. But when we do, we think about play in side by side or face to face. So we either do activities that are side by side, like walks, yoga. We do yoga together or exercise every morning. We both meditate, though we're not meditating we're meditating at the same time, but maybe in a different room. But we both are in our process in these parallel lines. And we do things face to face, like going on dates or talking to each other, you know, or eye gazing sometimes. Yesterday we were having fun with it because we're like, imagine eye gazing for 5 minutes. That would be fun.
Because Leslie had a process where she was kind of asked to give a talk about it, and that was one of her points was, you know, I gazed for 5 minutes.
I said 1 minute, I think.
And we were like, imagine that. Anyways,
sometimes you don't feel safe, and then that's totally,
it's okay.
You know, okay. But yeah, playing in the relationship, we'll take dance classes together, or you know, something that's fun.
Sometimes she invites me to do these ballet fitness classes. They're really fun. Our daughter loves to watch me do it. But you know, I mean, it's just another example of like, just have fun, right?
Yes. And saying yes, when you say yes to the invitation to play, it's saying yes to the relationship. It was funny because earlier I was thinking of a question, and I was thinking about the keys to the relationship. And I thought, you know, for the lasting relationship, but then I stopped myself for a moment because I thought, you know, is that necessary to include? If Leslie, to your point for number 4, that presencing and being of the moment, in the moment, you know, we don't need to cast to the future just to, right? Because we put so much on things, just practice in the moment, in the days. I think one of you said, I think Juan, you did in something relation to something else. We make a choice every day, right? And we make a choice in how we show up. And yeah.
I think the future is made up of all the right nows, right? I mean, so many things can happen on a day-to-day basis that I think the key is just the weight of the expectation and the tacit kind of I don't know how you call it, taking it for grantedness, maybe. Or like, oh, we've just committed to always be together, so I can fall asleep at the wheel because Like that's what we agreed. And that is something we also talked about. We talked about, you know, kind of creating these blocks of nows and coming back at those checkpoints and just being open to the concept that it's not forever.
And those might change, right?
That
Yeah.
like I always tell Leslie that I've loved her since always, because that's how I feel, right? My soul feels like I've always loved her, but it doesn't mean it has to be forever, you
Yeah.
know,
Or look the same.
or look the same.
Right.
Exactly.
And in fact, we've fallen in love with the same person in a different way, right?
Beautiful.
So, and I
Times.
love Esther Perel, which you might know. She's a relationship sexologist and psychologist, and she talks about how many times she's fallen in love with her husband in different ways, right?
Mhm.
And
But that doesn't have to happen. It
Right.
doesn't have to be. I mean, we used to live for 20, 30 years. Now we live for 90.
Right.
And
Yes.
make room for that, right? And we
Yeah.
also are on this path of growth and change, and all this stuff happens. And so you just have to enjoy right now.
one of the things that
And
you
make
know,
it for now.
when I have couples come to me, clients, and they say, I'm just looking to see how I can reconnect with my partner. One of the shifts that we do is that the word reconnect is already in past or future, because you're looking to connect like you used to. You want to reconnect, or you want to reconnect so that in the future it looks different. And then we take away the emphasis of the now. So what would it look like if we, instead of we say, you know, I'm looking to reconnect, I'm looking to connect, because we come
Yes.
back to the now. And
Mm.
so connect, and that's what we try to do. It's not easy all the time. I'm not saying it's, you know, it's intentional. We have to be reminded a lot of times. We love this conversation because it brought us to, hey, how are we you know, and having this conversation.
It made us revisit some
yeah.
of these things too. So it was,
Well-
thank you for the opportunity to do that, because it was
Oh,
fun.
yeah. Yeah. Thanks for being here. And it's so inspiring and full of possibilities for anyone listening today, women, men. I hope that it's shared really widely, because I just think it has so much promise for relationships and coming to ourselves. Just that's the message: come to ourselves to come to another. Leslie, if you'd like to share, I always just like to end on where can people find you, because I know they're going to want to look and find you and Juan.
Thank you. So you can find me on Instagram at Sabios, that's Sabios parenting, Sabios parenting. I'm also on sabiosparenting.com, and launching a new course for mothers called the Ever Evolving Mother, which you can find at sabiosparenting.com/EEM for Ever Evolving Mother. Yeah, and you can always direct message me or email me through my website. I'd love to meet new people and work with different, you know, my clients ultimately are my teachers as well, and we're all in this together. So thank you.
Oh,
And you
beautiful.
find me by finding her. I'm not,
I invite him to my
Uh,
Instagram and to,
but I'm
Yeah.
happy to be a resource, share my journey. And if I can answer, you know, questions, or, you know, through the stuff that I've managed or dealt with or worked through or are working through, provide any sense of compassion for someone that's doing the same, I'm happy to do that.
I love it. Thank you. What a generous offering. It's been wonderful, and we'll put everything in the show notes, any kind of resources. And Leslie, I love the Ever Evolving Mother name. When I saw that on Instagram, I thought, oh, it's so beautiful. So beautiful.
thank you so much.
So thank you for being here. Thank you to the listeners for being here. Please share with friends, family, if this resonates with you and you think someone in your life could benefit from it. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical Sisterhood. To learn more about my one-on-one coaching programs or join the Mystical Sisterhood membership, visit MaureenSpielman.com or mysticalsisterhood.com. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next episode.